Hello and welcome back. Today we're going to be taking a brief look at functions. So, what are functions? Basically, they are code snippets that allow for some great reuse. They allow us to simplify our code by moving blocks of code into a special place called the function that we can then call from other places in our code. So instead of having one really huge long main function, we can actually extract out statements and lines of the code from there and put them into a block that we can put somewhere else in our code. And they help us define modular programs. And so what that means is that basically what we've been talking about, where it allows you to break your program off into smaller chunks that are more maintainable and easier to divide work up against or with multiple people. So this is the really cryptic look at what a function looks like. So there's a return type, a space, followed by the name of the function. Then you have the open parenthesis. Then you have any parameters that the function takes, and it can take anywhere from 0 to whatever you want to pass in, number of parameters. There is a limit. I forget what the limit is, but it has to do with the calling semantics. And it's going to be architecture dependent, I believe. And then inside the curly braces is the block of code that represents your function. So let's take a look at what one actually looks like. So here what we see is this function called do_work. It takes no parameters, as there's no values within the parentheses. It has a return type of void. And so remember, this is that special type I was talking about in the data types video, which means that there's really nothing that it returns. There's no information that this function passes back to its caller. And then inside here, I just have a comment of some random block of code that you might do. So let's take a look at another example. This one is an add function. So this takes two parameters, both of type int. So when you define your parameters, the parameters need a data type, and they also need a name or an identifier. So in this case, the first parameter is of type integer. Its name is x. The second parameter, which is delimited by a comma, is of type int, and its name is y. And this function add returns an integer. So inside the curly braces, we can see that we have return x plus y. Semicolon. And so this return is the special keyword that tells the compiler this is the value you wish to pass back to the caller. So it's going to pass back the result of x plus y and send that back to whoever called this function. So let's take a look at what this actually looks like in a full program. So our program, we have #include IOStream to get in to pull in our ability to output and input numbers or data. Then we define our function, int add, it's the same thing, returns x plus y. Then we have our int main function. And so you notice that these are separate blocks of code in our program. So down in our int main, we define two variables, then we ask the user to input two values, and we store those in x and y. And now this is where we're actually going to make use of our function now. Down here we have int sum. And so what this does is it defines a new variable, assigns the result of the function add into it. So it calls in add x plus y, the two numbers that the user inputs, and stores that data in sum. And then we just output that data to the user so that they know what the sum of the two numbers is that they added. And at the end of main, we always have to return 0. Or return a value. In this case, we're returning 0. So that's the quick little overview of how we use it. Just remember that when you call it the function name, parentheses, and then the parameters separated by commas. Okay, so the order in which you add functions or define functions in your code matters. So if we were to switch the order in which we define the main function and the add function, this isn't actually going to work. So in C++, you always have to define a function before you use it. There are two ways around it. The first way is to define the entire function block like we did up here first. So we have int add, and then we have our int main. The other way to do it is what's called function prototyping. So we can actually prototype what the signature of the method is. And the signature of the method is the return type, the name, and the parameter types. So the signature of the add method is it returns an integer, its name is add, and it takes 2 integer inputs as parameters. So basically what this does is this tells the compiler that, hey, there's some add function, and we're going to be using it in our program. So if you ever see add, it takes 2 integers, it's okay that it's not really, that we don't really have a body of that function yet. Then we have our int main. We call it just like normal, so it's the same code as before. And down at the bottom of the file, we define what the body of that add function looks like. So with that, that's kind of the brief high-level overview of functions. You know how to define them now. You know how to set up parameters in there. There's some more topics around functions that we'll talk about later, but they're a little bit more advanced and kind of out of scope for this. So yeah, go ahead and practice a little bit with these, and I'll see you next time. Thanks.